Let's talk about Ancient Fairy Dragon. Ancient Fairy Dragon is a card with over a decade of history. First released in 2009, it initially saw a ton of play at the competitive level, because it was a level 7 synchro monster at a time when your only other option was the limited Black Rose Dragon. Once extra deck started to be a toolbox of monsters you were actually liable to summon over the course of a game, and not a holding facility for as many different starred synchros as possible, its play rates flatlined. Its effects to search field spells and summon monsters were too niche, and from about 2011 to 2016, it was widely regarded as the worst of the Signer dragons. Well, maybe not the worst. But in 2016 and 2017, two things happened that skyrocketed this card to the peak of playability. Firstly, there was a design shift at Konami. Prior to 2016, field spells had been mid at best, usually giving stat boosts to archetypal monsters or maybe minor protection. But in 2016, Konami started experimenting with giving field spells extremely powerful one-sided effects. This was exemplified in 2016's ABC Structure deck, in which they released a card that would set the standard for powerful field playmaker, Union Hanger. Over the next few months, Konami would retread this ground again and again, printing field spell after field spell that added an archetypal monster from the deck to the hand on activation. The second thing that happened was the printing of Destrudo the Lost Dragon's Frisian. This card's incredible effect allowed any monster to cosplay as a level 7 synchro, and its typing lined up perfectly with one of the most powerful field spells in the game, Dragon's Ravine. The stage was set for AFD to make a comeback, and it did in a big way. Both of AFD's effects were critical to its overnight success. The second allowed you to activate a ton of powerful field spells over the course of a single turn, and the first allowed you to turn the advantage you got off those spells into immediate onboard presence. Add to that the fact that AFD's effects were soft once per turns, meaning you could activate each effect only once per turn per copy, and it wasn't uncommon to see at least 3 field spells and their consequences on your very first play of the game. There were a few different decks that emerged from these interactions. Firstly was, unsurprisingly, an FTK that looped field spells to gain advantage before doing some exceptionally boring bullshit like cannon soldiering. Just fill in the blanks here honestly, pre-errata, this thing was basically Firewall at home. The second, and far and away most successful brew, was Spiral. Spiral Resort is not a once per turn, so AFD was perfect for popping a copy just to add another one to hand, and then summoning the searched monster for free. The third, and in my opinion most interesting, was Field Spell Control. This deck completely revolved around Ancient Fairy Dragon. It would attempt to use Dragon's Ravine to get an AFD into rotation, then activate some number of Union Hanger, Magical Meltdown, Spiral Resort, Trickstar Light Stage, Dragonic Diagram, and the Hidden City. All field spells that added a card from your deck to your hand. It would then use AFD to cheat those monsters onto the board for everything from hyper-consistent sub-tier setups to huge combo ABC boards, and everything in between. Unfortunately, both of these decks were casualties of the March 2018 ban list, which banned AFD. Now this would be the end of our story, but for money. See, AFD isn't just any old monster you can keep on the list far past the point where it'd be relevant. It's a Signer Dragon, one of the most profitable likenesses from Yu-Gi-Oh's One Good series. In order to sell a new set based around these monsters, Konami needed to release AFD on parole, and it did so with an errata. Erratas, or small changes to the text of powerful cards, are occasionally added to fan-favorite monsters in order to keep them playable, but less powerful than they were. They're usually added to older cards to bring them more in line with modern card design principles. Hard once per turns, prohibition clauses like the one on Sangan, or occasionally just outright changing the effect. Frequently, these changes completely doom the card to unplayability, but sometimes they still have a home, and sometimes they're just as broken as the day they were banned. I think AFD is going to belong to the latter category. Its errata changes its effects to hard once per turns, but it still permits a single copy to pivot between differently named field spells and extend for free from the hand. That's probably enough to stop any FTKs, but it's not enough to prevent this card from being absolutely broken. Today we're going to be exploring how this deck might be dominant in 2 different arenas. Firstly, in Master Duel, where Ancient Fairy Dragon is already legal, and secondly in the TCG, where it becomes legal this weekend. We'll begin with Master Duel. God, it feels weird to be using the old SMD set again. I can't talk this duelist up enough, but Emperor Stove has put in an unbelievable amount of work into making this deck playable, and what stands in front of you is their list. With one notable exception. They're playing a copy of Illegal Knight over Wandering Griffin Rider because frequently you want to beat back an opponent's established board rather than protect your own. That, and the monster on your side of the field, frequently doesn't stay there for long. Now, because there's so much interplay between every part of this well-oiled machine, it's going to be difficult for me to give you a traditional card by card, but I'm going to do my best. First, let's begin with the field spells and their implications. Dragon's Ravine sends Destrudo the Lost Dragon's Frisian to the graveyard, but a lot has changed in the interim since AFD was banned. Since then, Dragoonity Remus has been released, which is not only a searcher for Dragon's Ravine, but a 2-star monster, meaning it can be part of Sprite Elf, can be reborn off of Sprite Elf, and can be material that sits on your side of the field preparing for a combo. Obviously, Union Hanger needs no introduction. It adds an ABC piece on activation, and when you normal summon an ABC piece, equips an appropriate Union monster from your deck to the card. It has, however, gotten new support recently in Union Driver, which allows you to actually use a piece rather than run afoul of its prohibitionary clause. Through clever use of B, A, and C, you can get almost infinite material on your side of the field while setting up long ABC summons. This is going to be most of where your brainpower is used. Therion Discoliseum is a mechanism by which the deck can access an Omni-Negate before a card like Nibiru comes down to ruin their day. Therion King Regulus is an incredibly powerful monster, but is not only searchable by way of the field spell. You can also add it from deck to hand using the effect of Cleafor Genius, provided you figure out a way to summon 2 monsters to its link points at the same time. More on that later. We're playing the Adventure Package, 1 copy of Water Enchantress at the Temple, 1 copy of Wandering Griffin Rider or Illegal Knight, depending on your preference, and of course 2 copies of Rite of Aramesir, 1 Fateful Adventure, and 1 Dracoback the Rideable Dragon, the max allowed in Master Duel. These cards are right at home in the strategy, even without the field spell that Water Enchantress of the Temple can technically search from your deck. It not only allows you to get 2 bodies onto the field without committing to your normal summon, it also has incredible stat lines for a couple of plays we'll discuss when we get to the extra deck. Finally, the remainder of the main deck is made up of staples, 3 copies of Maxi, 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, a Foolish Burial to access pretty much any part of your game plan, seems like a waste to not play Terraforming, and 2 Called by the Grave. The extra deck is where things start to get spicy. Ancient Fairy Dragon is not only an incredible combo starter, it's also a 7-star monster, which means that you can use it and the card that you summoned while a Rite of Aramesir token was on your side of the field to overlay for number 42 Galaxy Tomahawk, legal exclusively in Master Duel. That can summon 2 tokens to Cleafor Genius's link points at the same time, which can add a copy of Therion King Regulus from your deck to your hand, even absent a copy of Therion Discoliseum. We're playing 2 copies of IP Masquerena because frequently you'll want to use the first one as part of your setup combo to give you some sort of insulation against cards like Lightning Storm, and end on the second one. Platinum Gadget is a great way to convert 2 ABC pieces on your side of the field into the entire line. We have to be playing 2 copies of ABC because we want to at least be able to tribute it and summon a second copy of ABC once. Barricade Borg Blocker smooths out some truly heinous hands. Sprite Elf is right at home in a strategy full of Link 2s that you don't necessarily want to keep on board. Topologic Trisbana isn't fantastic, but some sick twisted individuals decided they wanted to play Labyrinth this format. And then of course we've got Unicorn, Access Code, the Anti-Cheese White Woman, and Apollosa Bow of the Goddess. Let me show you what this deck is capable of. Now we've sourced this replay directly from Emperor Stove, so I really would appreciate if you checked out their socials after this. This hand represents a best of all possible worlds type of grip. We're just using it to show off the mainline combo, but the real strength of this deck is its ability to play through points of interaction. You can get a lot done with just a Union Hanger. Here we're going to begin with a copy of Dragon's Ravine. That's going to send a copy of Destrudo to the graveyard for the low cost of a B, and then after activating Rite of Aramesir and setting a Fateful Adventure for the low cost of half our life points, we will summon the Destrudo from the graveyard. Next, we'll trigger Fateful Adventure for a Dracoback, then again, in order to pitch the Dracoback for a copy of Illegal Knight, then again, we'll activate Dracoback in graveyard and Illegal Knight in the same chain to summon it to our side of the field, and now it's time to get off to the races. We'll synchro summon a copy of Ancient Fairy Dragon. After that, we'll activate the effect of the Ancient Fairy Dragon in order to cycle into a Union Hanger, and we'll activate that next. That's going to grab a B, then we'll normal summon the B in order to grab a Union Driver from deck. We'll activate Union Driver in order to get an A that can actually summon itself, and then we'll link those 2 off for a copy of Cleafor Genius. From here, we can activate the graveyard effect of B and A. Don't worry about keeping pieces in the graveyard. They are going to end up there regardless. We're going to activate the effect of the Ancient Fairy Dragon to get a C onto our side of the field before making number 42 Galaxy Tomahawk, and it doesn't really matter that we've put another monster on field and therefore can't summon a token. The only thing we really care about in terms of the Tomahawk is its ability to trigger Cleafor Genius and get a Therion King Regulus from deck to hand. Next, we'll go into Masquerena and Sprite Elf, and now, of course, we can send our entire field to the graveyard to make a pretty powerful Apollosa that is immune to destruction. We'll trigger the effect of the C for a B, and then we'll summon Therion King Regulus. Fun fact, because that that C is equipped to the Regulus, you can then activate its effect to summon it to your side of the field to make the second IP Masquerena. We'll trigger a bunch of pieces in the graveyard here, then summon the B before making an ABC. Afterwards, we'll activate the B on field to give our ABC spell immunity so it doesn't lose to Forbidden Droplet and pass back to our opponent. They'll begin by tributing half the board off for a Lava Golem and a little more off for a Volcanic Queen. They'll Regeki here, but we let it resolve because, of course, the ABC Dragon Buster is immune. With only 3 cards left, we can easily climb back from this position. The ABC can contest the last unknown, and then at end step, we'll bring back as many monsters as possible, triggering the Union Hanger in the process. We'll trigger the effect of the B as well in order to grab a piece from deck to hand, and this should be all she wrote. We'll draw for turn, and it's just a hop, skip, and a jump to lethal from here. We've got enough monsters in the extra deck to make it work. We'll go for a C summoning itself, then Regulus targeting a Regulus for a big beefy boy. Next, we'll go into a Nightmare Unicorn and activate not only the effect of the Unicorn, but also the C and the A in sequence in order to shuffle back this Messenger of Peace, the last thing giving us pause. Finally, we'll summon that B to our side of the field before linking it off for an access code talker at 5,300 attack points, and what do you know, we might as well make another ABC as well. Next, let's take a look at how this deck might manifest in the TCG. As you can see, it's a lot of the theory lifted from the previous one. We're still using Union Hanger and the ABC pieces to make very powerful combo ABC boards. We're still playing Remus and Dragon's Ravine in order to access Destrudo early and often. We're still playing Therion Disc Coliseum in order to get Omni Negates like Regulus onto our side of the field before big board breakers like Nibiru can come down. But now we get to play one of the most powerful field spell cards ever printed in Pressured Planet Wraithsoth. This is going to unlock Cash Tiras, including Unicorn, which can flex into Fenrir, which can flex into Riseheart. That interaction is responsible for the current best deck in the TCG metagame, but existing Cash Tira builds are mired by 3 huge problems. They're inflexible, they can only really do one thing, though they do it with staggering efficiency. They're inconsistent, in that frequently you can just open up a brick because there aren't enough playables in Cash Tira. You're kind of looking at all the good cards in the deck right now. And they have an inability to beat board breakers. Cards like Nibiru and Book of Eclipse are devastating against this strategy. This setup resolves all of those problems, and I sincerely hope it doesn't catch on. I'll just walk you through the cards you're probably unfamiliar with. We've got 3 copies of Cash Tira Unicorn, which can add a Cash Tira spell from your deck to your hand. Usually you'll be getting Cash Tira Theosis, which can target a Cash Tira you control and summon in defense position a Cash Tira with a different type. That'll be Fenrir, and then Fenrir can add a Cash Tira from your deck to your hand, here Riseheart. These 2 will overlay for a copy of Cash Tira Shangri-Ira, and then you can activate the effect of Riseheart in order to banish cards from the top of your opponent's deck and go into an Riseheart, a big macro cosmos, afterwards. There's other weird bits of interplay between these cards. For instance, Ancient Fairy Dragon being a 7 means that it shores up the lack of 7s quite frequently, but you'll see those in game. Let's head there now. Our match is up against Mathmech, and have you ever seen anything as beautiful as 3 field spells in the opening hand? We're going to begin with a copy of Pressure Planet that's going to grab from deck to hand a Unicorn. We'll activate the effect of the Unicorn on field in order to add a Cash Tira Theosis to hand, then we'll fire off a Union Hanger in order to grab a C. Next, we're going to normal summon the C, we'll trigger the effect of the Union Hanger to get a B, and then afterwards we can activate Foolish Burial in order to send a copy of Destrudo to the graveyard. That Destrudo will change itself to a level 3 when targeting the C to go into an Ancient Fairy Dragon, which will trigger the B to get an A. Afterwards, we'll activate AFD in order to pop that Union Hanger, and get ourselves a copy of Disco Coliseum. We'll activate Disc Coliseum in order to get a King Regulus and equip that B, and because the B is equipped, we can then special summon it. Afterwards, we're going to activate the effect of the Ancient Fairy Dragon to summon the A from our hand, and link those 2 off for an IP Masquerena. We'll trigger the effect of the B in order to grab a B, and then we'll make an ABC Dragon Buster, use the effect of the Cash Tira Theosis into a Fenrir, then activate the effect of the Fenrir to grab a copy of Unicorn for next turn. We're going to overlay for a Shangri-Ira, then activate the effect of the Riseheart in hand. That's going to be summoned, and then we'll banish a copy of Cash Tira Unicorn in order to trigger the effect of the Shangri-Ira, making a Riseheart and pass. Our opponent will draw for turn, and this should be lights out. They're going to begin with a copy of Addition. That's absolutely fine before going into a Lingaribo. We'll trigger the effect of the Riseheart, and then when they go for the Parallel Exceed, we'll activate the effect of the ABC Dragon Buster to banish it. We'll take a couple of cards from their face down banished, and they'll scoop them up. As you can see, Ancient Fairy Dragon has a ton of potential in some of the top decks in both Master Duel and the TCG. I look forward to seeing with what you're going to brew with it when it becomes legal in 4 hours. Get cooking.